So the day that we were anticipating, wondering what would happen, would the Hawks actually keep their draft picks? Would they not? Well, they kept their draft picks and they actually had three picks on the night for that matter. Kobe Bumpkin, Seth Lundy, and Mohamed Gay for the record. So on the heels of this, and it's interesting because we had this conversation with our guy Brad Rowland of Locked on Hawks last week. He and I, we were both talking about that conference that, and whether or not the press conference from Landry Fields kind of gave some insight to the media here in Atlanta on whether or not they would keep those draft picks. We both kind of thought they would. And I think you kind of thought that they were leaning in that direction, right? Well, course, lo and behold, they did. But here's the question. Do you feel like with the other comments that we all heard Landry Fields say, talking about the identity of the team and the culture and the fit, do you feel like we have any better clue or picture of who these Hawks are or want to be after those picks?
No, I don't. I like we kind of talked about this a little bit last night on Sports Extra on 11 Live, is the fact that, I don't know where this team is headed because, like even after the press conference, we kind of felt like we had a good idea, like something was going to go down. But, in speaking with the Athletic, Landry Fields talked about long-term plans. And I was like, wait a minute. Like, what are we doing here? Are the Hawks trying to be contenders? Or are they trying to build long-term? Or like, what are we doing here? Because I feel like in today's NBA, you can't do both because the Warriors kind of did that and they got away with it. But the Warriors are the team that can get away with it because you got some Hall of Famers on that squad and guys who have been there, done that, and won multiple championships before. So I think the Hawks can't play that game. I feel like you either choose today. Either you're telling me that we're going to try to be contenders and you go that route, or you say, you know what, this is not working. We have to, we got some financial things that are upon us. Hey, we talking about we don't want to wear no aprons. We don't want to wear the first apron, second apron, third apron, and all that stuff. Yeah, I can understand that if you be straight out with me. But I really feel like Landry Fields and is not really giving me a clear vision as to what they're trying to do because, I'm really big on vision, T, because Terry Fontenot, Arthur Smith have made it really clear. And their moves, they talked about it, and they've gone out and executed that. Landry Fields, what he's saying is not matching up with what he's doing.
Yeah, I would agree. And you gave a couple nuggets in there that I want to break down, but I think I'll go backwards to forwards and start at the Arthur Terry doorstep and then go to the AA doorstep. Because the doorstep of Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot has basically said, we're going to lead with violence on both ends of the ball, and we're going to go get the violent people to do it. Right. Bijan Robinson is going to be violent whether you think he's a nice guy until he toasts the rock. Okay, so they got violence on that end just as an example, but Matt Bergeron is going to be violent too, I have a feeling. And then they went out and got some pieces on the defense to be violent. So it fits the culture. They've still got quality guys off the field, but they've got some guys that look like they might be violent just where you need them to be, which is on the field. So there's one where you see the vision. They're right. They wrote it and they made it plain. Alex Anthopoulos. I'm going to get my farm system and I'm going to build in my farm system. And then when I need to get to those guys, I'm going to bring them up. And if they're ready, they stay up. Michael Harris II. And if they're not so ready, they may go back down, but they may come back up. Jared Schuster. So he's showing you. And I'm going to always make sure I got bats on bats on bats. So absolutely. If for some reason, like you lose your top two guys in the rotation, Jarvis, they can rotate in and out, in and out, in and out as they please. So you know what their vision and their identity is. We stay stacked. I think you can agree.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I'm not really sure with the Hawks. I'll be honest. I think you make a great point bridging what Landry Fields said in the presser, bridging that with what he said in the Athletic. It does feel a little bit like this is giving me long-term vibes. I'm getting that. And I don't know if I like that because you made a great point. With Steph Curry and the time that it took for the Warriors to build around him into a championship caliber team. Well, here are two things. What did they get? Maybe like in that 6 to 7 year time frame, right around the time of Michael Jordan as well. Yeah. But you could see pieces along the way, like a Klay Thompson and a Draymond Green, right? And then they just started adding piece on top of piece on top of piece. And it started to make sense. We may not have known it, most people, until this year, but the Nuggets have been at that for a while too. It's just they got off track 2 years ago when Murray went down. And that's what really, really threw them off. But once Jamal Murray came back and became himself, you kind of saw the 8 years, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. And hey, let's talk about it this way, Jarvis. We're in what? We're going into Trey's 5th year?
Yeah.
So going into Trey's 5th year, then you theoretically would have 2 to 3 more years to build around him into championship caliber teams. But here's the challenge. Somehow, some way, you're going to have to make it very, very plain with what you do in this offseason. Because right now, it does feel like, and I'm not saying it is, Jarvis, but it feels just a little bit closer to a rebuild than it feels to a dynasty build.
Yeah, that's and that's what I'm sure Tony Ressler doesn't want to hear as well. You know what I'm saying? Like, because he was like, okay, I brought you in, I made this move, for you to be able to come in and say, hey, let's get this, let's right this ship. But like you said, with the new CBA coming into play, that is a big dog part of the conversation going around amongst executives all around the NBA.
Oh, yeah.
Because like some teams are running away from it, and you wouldn't even be able to tell that they're running away from it. So I think all of those things are right now was Travis Knight with the Wizards. Like you saw Bradley Beal go out the door for basically nothing. You saw Kristaps Porzingis, go out the door, and they had to bring a third team in to get that situation figured out. You know what I'm saying? So all of those things, all that to say, I really feel like Landry Fields, like, man, something needs to shake, because if I'm starting to feel like they're going to probably bring this same roster back. Like that's where I am, T. And I hope that I'm wrong. I don't mind being wrong on this one, but if I'm right, like this is not a good look. And I feel like Landry Fields, you've been selling a lot more than you can actually doggone. He's been chewing on a lot more than he actually can bite. Whatever that doggone saying is, T. I can't even get it right.
Bite off more than he can chew.
Bite off more than he can chew. There we go. Yes, he's bit off a little bit more than he can chew, especially when you talk about first time running the show.
Yeah, this is a really challenging one, because I feel like, and I hate to keep making the comparison, but it is a really good example based on where we are in year 3 of under Terry Fontenot as GM.
Right.
He told you the first years that he was hamstrung. He raised it to the rooftops. Every time he got a chance, he reminded you of just how hamstrung he was, right? So I felt like, okay, fine. He's right. He's not just blowing smoke. They really are hamstrung. But it was the fact that he kept that narrative in front of us so that we could understand that, hey, I'm giving Arthur Smith the best that I can for him to work with, all things considered. I don't mind if that's what it ends up being. I mean, I do mind, but I don't mind if that's what it ends up being. But maybe the Hawks might want to think about what that narrative is. And maybe that was what it was. Maybe the press conference and the interview with The Athletic were kind of preparing us for like, hey, we know you want to be in win now mode, but this luxury tax situation and this new CBA simply may not allow for that, because we simply don't have the partners to move the pieces around that we would need to get in order to win now. That may be the bottom line, especially because some of those pieces that we thought might have been viable, like a Kristaps Porzingis, he was tops on, I think, both of our lists when we did our show on Bleacher Report, when we stopped by their stream 2 weeks ago, right? So with players like that gone, unless you can go to some other teams that might be wholesaling, like a Blazers team, because picking up Scoot Henderson makes you think they might be getting rid of, letting Damian Lillard walk, and maybe they'll let the rest of that team walk, and then you can maybe look at the likes of who they have up and down that roster. But other than another team being wholesale with having players out there, again, I'm not saying that the Hawks are in rebuild mode, but what I am saying is maybe it's time for us to think about the fact that they may be in some type of resetting. We'll call it that.
Yeah. Reset, like that makes a little bit more sense, right? Because those are some of the things that, when you look at this roster, right? Because, let's keep it funky. Like John Collins is supposed to be traded by now. Like, and the reason why I feel like he's not traded is because they probably asking for too much. Because at the end of the day, you have to, it's almost gonna have to be like a 2-for-1 situation, like you mentioned. Like you have to trade for maybe a couple role players or bench guys. Yeah, like you can't trade starter for starter or
you'll have to give away more than just him.
Exactly. So those are some of the things that it's gonna be some tough decisions that have to be made. Like we talked about this offseason before it even began. Like Landry Fields I feel like he had made those decisions. So and now when going into free agency, there are a lot of NBA insiders talking about, hey, there are going to be some moves potentially leading up to free agency. So now you have to go ahead and make a decision. Just make a decision. Like, that's all I'm asking. Just make a decision. It don't matter right now at this point which way you go. Make a decision so we can know where you're headed and where you're going.
Yeah, because I think for us from a media perspective, trying to kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together, and then even the fan base trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together, oftentimes when you are transparent and you kind of give a little bit of the lay of the land and a blueprint, then you see people they may not, like you said, may not agree with it, but at least they can understand it or kind of follow the tea leaves. So we'll be watching the tea leaves as well.